It was a warm sunny morning in the small house at the other side of the wood. Mr. Tickle was asleep. You didn't know there was such a thing as a tickle, did you? Well, there is. Tickles are small and round and have arms that stretch and stretch and stretch. Extraordinary long arms. Mr. Tickle was fast asleep. He was having a dream. It must have been a funny dream because it made him laugh out loud, and that woke him. He sat up in bed, stretched his extraordinary long arms, and yawned in an enormous yawn. Mr. Tickle felt hungry, so do you know what he did? He reached out one of his extraordinary long arms, opened the bedroom door, reached down the stairs, opened the kitchen door, reached into the kitchen cupboard, opened the biscuit tin, took out a biscuit, brought it back, upstairs, in through the bedroom door, and back to Mr. Tickle in bed. As you can see, it's very useful indeed having long arms as long as Mr. Tickle. Mr. Tickle munched his biscuit. He looked out of the window. Today looks very much like a tickling day, he thought to himself. So later that morning Mr. Tickle had made his bed, cooked breakfast, and set off through the wood. As he walked along, he kept his eyes very wide open, looking for someone to tickle, looking for anyone to tickle. Eventually Mr. Tickle came to a school. There was nobody about, so reaching up his extraordinary long arms to a high window ledge, Mr. Tickle pulled himself up and peeked through the open window. Inside he could see a classroom. There were children sitting at their desk and a teacher writing on the blackboard. Mr. Tickle waited a minute and then reached in through the window. Mr. Tickle's extraordinary long arms went up to the teacher, paused, and then tickled. The teacher jumped in the air and turned round very quickly to see who was there, but nobody was there. Mr. Tickle grinned a mischievous grin. He waited another minute and then tickled the teacher again. This time he kept on tickling. Soon the teacher was laughing out loud, saying, stop it," over and over again. All the children were laughing too. It was such a funny sight. There was a terrible pandemonium. Eventually Mr. Tickle thought that he had had enough fun, so he gave the teacher one more tickle for luck, and then quietly brought his arms back through the open window. Chuckling to himself, he jumped down from the window, leaving the poor teacher to explain what it was all about, which of course he couldn't. Then Mr. Tickle went to town. That day Mr. Tickle had What a day Mr. Tickle had. He tickled the policeman on the traffic duty at the crossroads in the middle of town. He caused an enormous traffic jam. He tickled the greengrocer just as he was piling apples neatly in his shop window. The greengrocer fell over backwards and the apples rolled all over the shop. At the railway station the guard was about to wave his flag for the train to leave. As he lifted his arm in the air, Mr. Tickle tickled him. Every time he tried to wave his flag, Mr. Tickle tickled him until the train was 10 minutes late leaving the station, and all the passengers were furious. That day Mr. Tickle tickled everybody. He tickled the doctor, he tickled the butcher, he even tickled Mr. Stamp, the postman. He dropped all his letters in a puddle. Then Mr. Tickle went home. Sitting in his armchair in his small house at the other side of the wood, he laughed and laughed every time he thought about the people he had tickled. If you are any way ticklish, beware of Mr. Tickle and those extraordinary long arms of his. Just think, perhaps he's somewhere about you at this very moment while you are reading this book. Perhaps this extraordinary long arm of his is already creeping up to the door of his room. Perhaps it's opening the door now and coming into the room. Perhaps before you know what's happening, you will be well and truly tickled.